19 minutes to 11 o'clock. Welcome back. Let's continue with our debate on corruption now here on Today on eNCA. I've got with me Kganyago from the SIU. That's a special investigating unit. We have a former SARS official, Johann van Loggerenberg, with us. And we also have Caroline James, a lawyer for Corruption Watch, and Sam Soul from Amabhungane. Now, just before that break, we were talking about what should happen. And Caroline, you alluded to some of it. And Johann, you spoke about the need for alignment. But I want to start with you again, Ntate Kganyago, just to say, as the SIU, what different actions are you now doing besides fast-tracking the recovery of some of those monies through civil legal processes like we're seeing now against Eskom?
Yes, from our side, we making sure that we fast-track the cases, but also we use the use of the special tribunal. It is one of the key things that we're going to do because that helps us to move.
Have there been any cases recently in the special tribunal?
Yes, there has been. Last week there was a case that happened around the Transnet issues, but we do not want to get into the details of it. It happened last week, Thursday. And then there was a case around the freezing of the pension that of the Mr. Lekalakala, who was the head of the Department of Health in Northwest Province. The case was aired about 2 weeks ago. And there are, as we speak, 26 cases that are being processed now. They are case management, and most of them will be getting into the special tribunal for trial now during this next few months. Therefore, we're using that as a way of fast-tracking because the president has given us the special tribunal to be able to fast-track these cases and deal with them. That's one thing. The second thing that we're doing, as you might have seen with this particular issue of the relief funds and the PPEs, we went and said to the president, can you give us an opportunity to have a bigger or a broader proclamation that will deal with all the cases so that we do not have to, each time we get an allegation, come to you and the process take long before we start investigation. And that was given to us. And what does that do? It helps us to say when an allegation arrives, we don't have to go through that process. We then immediately, real time, go into the investigation. And in most cases, we find that the monies have not as yet been spent. And we are able to stop, if the processes were irregular, to stop the monies from being paid, because that is very important. It saves us time, it saves us money to even go after people where to recover the money because we would have stopped it before the money is spent.
So the proclamation is in place. It's one tool that the SIU is going to be using. Sam, do you think this kind of tough talk we're seeing recently from the president, including in the newsletter brought about by this COVID-19 corruption, which is disgusting to say the least, that when people are ill and they need their help, some people are busy putting their hands in the cookie jar and stealing and behaving in all sorts of strange ways, which is really unbecoming. It's very inhumane, in fact. Do you think this would help? Do you think this new noise we're hearing is going to really help? Should we be hopeful?
Look, I think the fact that there seems to be a major public outcry does help. Because what has been lacking has been the political will. And until we see, action from the top down, I think the public is right to be cynical about the words that are spoken. The fact that the statement from the ANC lamenting what has happened is delivered by the Secretary General Ace Magashule, it's just a joke because there is a mountain of evidence that at least within the party should result in action being taken against Mr. Magashule. We don't always have to rely in terms of the moral and ethical codes that are required for our society to function to rely on the criminal justice system. We know that the criminal justice system has been deeply damaged, but that doesn't prevent us in companies, in organizations such as the ANC from taking action.
And sometimes, Sam, one gets a sense like they are hiding behind the law to say innocent until proven guilty, instead of really taking action within the party. I mean, look what happened with the VBS Bank. I think there were those two ANC provincial officials. When the whole VBS thing came out, they were suspended. And as soon as they were charged and they were applying for bail in court, they were unsuspended in the ANC.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example. So I think the public pressure must intensify so that our politicians realize that there are consequences, political consequences, for the fact that they are protecting each other.
And business people, because it takes two to tango. I mean, like in this PPE currently scandal that we're hearing about, the tenders, you'll have business on one side, and you've got people who are inside the public sector, in the public service, who are willing to take the jojo, so to speak.
Absolutely. And again, it's a question of political will. We have been pressing for, there's a new bill, or a procurement bill, in which we, as Amabhungane and other parts of civil society, have been pressing for all state procurement to insist on the disclosure of beneficial owners. And we understand that Treasury has supported this position, but there's been pushback from Cabinet, because people don't want that trough to be removed, because that's where they're all eating.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Caroline, you spoke about we need to capture the act of corruption not after the fact. Accountability has to happen in front. And Johann was speaking earlier about the need to align the whole value chain of the criminal justice system. Caroline, as a lawyer first, let me start with you. Johann, I'll ask you the same question as well. How do you do that? How do you create that atmosphere or system whereby you can pick things up before they happen?
So I think that, as Johann said, it's very important to align the different entities within the criminal justice system, and there needs to be collaboration between all the groups. We can't have the NPA acting in a silo and working on a specific investigation without utilizing the work of the SIU or of SARS or of various other elements within that. So there should be some form of communication between the different entities and the different bodies that are undertaking those investigations. But I think, as Sam mentioned as well, there's a role for civil society and concerned citizens to play in this, in addition to the state criminal justice systems. So if we can get greater transparency, we would then allow the media and civil society to help in monitoring what's happening, to identify problematic contracts, for example, that are given to politically exposed persons or people that have got connections to various government officials. And if that can then be identified and then fed back into the criminal justice system, it might help, as I've mentioned, how important it is to identify things before it happens. So if we can get state entities in the criminal justice system, the media and civil society to all work together and to all respect each other's roles in this broader accountability system, I do think that that's the best way that we can achieve better accountability and faster accountability, so we don't have to rely on prosecutions and convictions in court.
Johann, the alignment thing, do you think it's beginning to happen now? Because the president, when he did that proclamation that Kaizer Kganyago spoke about for the SIU, authorizing them to investigate any unlawful or improper conduct in the procurement of goods and services during this national state of disaster brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. He also announced the setting up of a special center. And I just want to read the units that are in that special center that have been brought together. The Financial Intelligence Center, the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, the NPA, National Prosecuting Authority, the Hawks, Crime Intelligence, and the SAPS Detective Service, South African Revenue Service, SARS, Special Investigating Unit, SIU, and the State Security Agency. Is it the beginning, possibly, of testing that kind of alignment, do you think?
I couldn't say, Mr. Moyane, but what I will say is that, firstly, prevention is better than cure. So I agree with the concept that the whole tender system and procurement system of government needs to be reviewed and relooked and modernized, and it needs to be done transparently, because if you can prevent, then you don't have to react. In terms of your example, I've seen teams and multi-agency setups like this before. Time will have to, judge whether this is going to be different from what I've seen in the past. But the alignment that I'm speaking of sits almost at parliamentary level, where the ministries of justice, police, finance, and other partners that form part of the criminal justice cluster combine their plans around combating corruption, so that when funds are allocated for the number of police officers that you then train, upskill, allocate to deal with this thing, there's a direct ratio to the number of prosecutors, for instance. And so should the Department of Justice ensure that there are the same number of judges and magistrates and support personnel in court buildings. So it's at a budgetary human resource management level in the manner in which you would operate a business. And then when you measure the efficacy and efficiency of the criminal justice system, you should measure it across the board with shared performance indicators and not these sort of siloed ones that almost compete with each other.
Yeah, Mr. Johann van Loggerenberg, thank you very much. So in a nutshell, and I've got very little time left, and my sense is unless we fix the whole value chain of the criminal justice system and align things appropriately and have the appropriate political will, we're not going to win this war against corruption. Am I correct, Caroline, as we conclude?
I think that you are correct. It's not a job that we can leave just to Shamila Batoy and the NPA, which, as everyone has mentioned, has been hollowed out by state capture. It's a project that requires all levels of government, whether it's political will and political action, as well as action of bureaucrats and the representatives and the officials within the NPA, Hawks, SARS. Okay. And as I said, civil society must play their role as well.
Thank you very much, Caroline James. Kaizer Kganyago from the SIU, thanks for your time as well this morning. And Sam Soul from Amabhungane and Johann van Loggerenberg, former SARS. Very interesting input there about how we can try and win this war against the pandemic of corruption in our country. And that's it from me for this hour. The next